on guys, Brandon here with Texas Revving, making another video on the S550 GT500, mostly because I hit the 2-year mark, and so I figured why not make a 2-year update. Now, not that 2 years is a whole lot of time, and not that the mileage is enough to really speak too far into it, but certainly more than like what a reviewer who has the car for 1 day can say about it, just to give you guys a little insight, and mostly just to have an excuse to show off the GT500 a little bit more as well. Now, a lot of it will be kind of more romance about the car, because I'll give you the TLDR version, and that is that I freaking love this car. Exceeded all my expectations. We'll see if this holds true, but even when I get the GTD, whenever that is, maybe a year from now, less than that, 2 years from now, I'd be kind of sad to let this thing go. I know there's some redundancy there in that it's, you know, 2 Mustangs with crazy horsepower through a very similar engine with paddle shifters done differently, don't get me wrong, but they're different cars, but similar enough to where it might seem redundant. I'd still feel sad selling this thing. It's made such an impression on me. We'll see if any of those thoughts change once the GTD comes in, but it'd be so sad to get rid of this thing for any car, whether it seems redundant or not. It's really made that much of an impression on me. That being said, also, the too long didn't read version of the negatives of this car aren't going to be terribly surprising. Not a whole lot's gone wrong with it. So little, in fact, that I actually went on Instagram earlier today and posted a story calling for some help from other 2020 to 2022 GT500 owners to see how they like their car, likes, dislikes, any problems, all that kind of stuff. And well, there's nothing surprising. So I really tried to pull from different resources, but you know what? I've got 2 years with this thing. I've got right around 7,500 to 8,000 miles on it. I know that's not a lot, but again, this is not a daily driver. This is among 3 Shelbys I have. I bought it in 2022. It's a 21-year model, and I bought it with like 900 miles or so. So that being said, at nearly 8,000 miles, I got to know it a fair deal. And those that know me know I can talk to a brick wall for a very long time. So just to have a little bit of structure for this video, I did write some things down. Let's talk about a little bit of running cost. I drive it a fair amount, but not enough to get oil changes at certain mile markers. I simply get an oil change about twice a year. Without pulling up actual receipts, I just know off the top of my head, they've been just about, if not just north of 250 bucks. I think they're around 260, creeping up to that $300 mark for a simple oil change. So that being, you know, oil change and oil filter change. That's it, nothing else done to that service. And it's creeping up to that $300 mark per service, done twice a year. We're just under $600 a year for oil changes. Good timing on this video too, because this is some fresh rubber. In fact, so fresh, I need to go out and drive this thing and get some impressions on this rubber. For a full set of tires, the 2 305s, the 2 315s, Cup 2s, it was $2,565 on Tire Rack after all of the cost. It's free shipping, but in Texas, sales taxes, you know, 8 1/4. Installations where things get interesting, it might have some variability depending on who does your installation and what trim of GT500 you have or you're wanting. This is the carbon fiber track pack, and so with these carbon fiber wheels, I would imagine the same is true for a GT350R or any car out there with carbon fiber wheels. You can't just go anywhere, or I suppose you can, and you can just cross your fingers. But these wheels, as you can imagine, are not cheap. The only times I see them trade hands is, you know, on eBay or Bring a Trailer, and they usually bring in about that $20,000 range for all 4. So we're talking nearly $5,000 per wheel. You can't just go to a discount tire, which 99% of the time I love discount tire. They're actually pretty cool. But you can't just go there and have them treat this wheel like any other. Without going all into it, more care needs to be taken with carbon fiber wheels. So much so that unfortunately, many Ford dealerships don't want to touch this stuff. It's a Ford, you bought it from a Ford dealership, they may not have the tools or the know-how to deal with these carbon fiber wheels, and they don't want that responsibility of replacing what could be a $5,000 wheel. So that being said, thankfully I do have a way to get my tires changed. And to make life easier, it is a mobile service. So I just bought the tires, they got shipped to me, and then this van came in within, you know, a week's notice of me texting them saying I want an appointment, and I got all 4 tires changed in my driveway. Now that being said, not crazy cheap either. In fact, there's an additional fee that was originally $50 per wheel, so it was a $200 additional fee just because they were carbon fiber, just because a different tool was required and different care is required for carbon fiber wheels. So yes, expensive, but you kind of expect that. You're going to some premium cars, some premium wheels. You can't just go just anywhere for a simple tire change. And that being said, we're just under $3,000 for all 4 tires, bought, delivered, and installed. The tires were just changed yesterday, and I have not drove it yet. So pretty excited to get a feel on that because I've never driven one of these. with brand new tires. Like I said, don't know what the previous owner did, but I do remember this thing having a lot more traction than it did right before I got new tires. Also, I need to get this car state inspected, and it probably would have failed with the old tires. Not probably, definitely would have. So it needed new tires, but it just had zero grip, big surprise. But it was like, you know, in the low 90s outside. I had driven it enough to get some temperature in the tires, and even quarter throttle with traction on, the thing just cut power because it just lost traction so easily. So when I got it home, I'm like, pretty sure I'm gonna need some new tires to even pass the inspection. And I looked, and yeah, I definitely need new tires. Of course, this is something I was totally expecting. This is no surprise, but the gas mileage, for lack of a better way to say it, it sucks. And that's okay, because it's a GT500. And that coupled with a small gas tank, I think it's 16 gallons, yeah, it goes by pretty quickly. Now that being said, this is not my daily driver, like I've already mentioned. But what I noticed with it is if you have the discipline to slowly put around with this thing, don't know why you would, it'll be pretty okay. That's hard to do. You buy this thing, you're gonna drive it hard. And yeah, gas goes pretty quick. I don't know what I'm averaging. If I were to check, I would be surprised if it's 10. Now, the last two things I've mentioned between gas not lasting too long and the tires not lasting too long either, both have to do with the weight. Now, here's the impressive thing with it. As heavy as this car is, all these things are a non-issue when you're actually driving it. You don't realize the car has a lot of weight to it when you drive it, and that's all done by the amazing engineering that made this thing feel as agile as it feels. But you notice the weight in gas mileage and tire degradation. Now that being said, this is what also speaks to how great this car is. Everything I just said is everything I personally came up with when trying to get nitty gritty into the cons list with this car. Yes, oil changes aren't terribly cheap. Tough break, you buy this for recreation, not as an investment. Tires aren't cheap either, and they don't last too long, relatively, also depending on how you use it. And the gas mileage sucks, also depending on how you use it. These are not hugely surprising things, and I felt bad that that's all I could come up with. I felt like I didn't do my work in the last 2 years to tell you guys all about it. So I went to Instagram, and like I said, I made a story kind of calling for other GT500 owners to say their experiences, and wouldn't you know it, nothing new. Everyone said pretty much the same thing. I've asked if people were having major issues with theirs or anything like that. None. Sample size of 1 for me, and sample size of all my followers who have this. No one's at least come out and said anything about problems, and so that's pretty cool. That being said, I figured I'd just read some of the things I got on Instagram, just verbatim, so you guys can hear it with me. Jared, thanks for chiming in as well. He said, I definitely like the power and the handling. Don't really like the weight. I wish Ford found a way to shed some weight off this bad boy. 4,100 pounds is a lot. If it would be closer to GTR weight, it would be a lot better. But yeah, they just were unapologetically heavy with this car, knowing that it made 760 horsepower and had a great transmission. And it really just hit its weight freakishly well. Someone else said, dislikes are going to have to be how fast tires wear out on track due to the weight of the car. Also the smaller tank on track, only a couple laps around COTA, and you're damn near empty. COTA being the Circuit of the Americas, I could imagine that as well. Don't know your name, but dsavage3900 on Instagram. Thanks for chiming in on that. And you've got a very, very cool Twister Orange GT500 track pack. He's also got a GT350, so very, very nice taste. What a sweet duo that is. Last one I'll read out for you guys is from Danny. He's had a GT500 for 2.5 years. He said the car runs great, still doesn't know if he can really say much being shy of 10,000 miles. He doesn't drive it much due to work, but having a Mustang with a dual clutch transmission is a thrilling experience, and he wouldn't want it any other way. He said that Ford missed that they didn't at least have the option with the manual, but he also said as someone who rarely drives a dual clutch transmission, he's thankful for it delivers a totally different experience. The car would have been lighter from factory, probably around 3,900 pounds. They definitely could have done a better job getting the weight down, in my opinion. Besides that, great car. Yeah, don't disagree there either. In 2019, I think, is when they unveiled this car and told you all the things technically about it. And I was very surprised it was not going to have a manual transmission. At the same time, I owned and still do own the 2017 GT350, which also had no option. It was only a Tremec 6-speed manual. But I think those transmissions fit the cars very, very well. Now that being said, does that mean you need to limit the option from consumers? No. If this thing did have a manual option, I wouldn't be complaining about that. I'd say more power to those who get the manual GT500. But I understood it in the sense that these two cars did coexist for 1 year, being 2020, the first year of this, the last year of the 350. And they were just two very, very different cars and different options. If you cared more about that driver involvement with the manual, 526 horsepower is not a small amount of power, and it's just a totally different dynamic. And with something like this, 760 horsepower seems a little bit easier to manage, not only with the great engineering of it, but just by clicking some paddles and doing it, it is really fun. Now, again, if they made it in a manual option, I wouldn't be complaining, but I do like the way this is equipped, in that I'm fortunate enough to be able to go to a manual transmission. At this point, I can go to 2 different ones. So having the option makes everything okay. Now, that being said, you can't just have paddle shifters if they're going to be apologetic and bad. This is a true dual clutch transmission. I'm really fortunate in that I've driven some really awesome cars with dual clutch transmissions, whether it's Porsche's PDK from a GT3, GT3 RS, or one really memorable one is years back, I knew someone with a Huracan Performante, and that dual clutch transmission was amazing because now you're doing it out of something with 10 cylinders and naturally aspirated that revs so high. And I remember that was really my eye-opening experience in that, oh, automatics are actually pretty freaking sick. Something about that Huracan in particular opened the floodgates to letting me see how fun a paddle shift transmission could be when done right. I've driven some automated manuals, I've driven some single clutch paddle shifter stuff, and it just ruins the experience, and I'd rather just have a manual. Thankfully, where I'm going with all this is this car is more so like the Performante in that sense, to where I feel like it only adds to the experience, but the more American version. You know, we still got the 5.2 liter V8 supercharged. It sounds just a little supercharged, a lot of exhaust. It's awesome, but doing everything through those paddle shifters where it pops on the upshift and everything, I have no problem with this being a dual clutch transmission. If it was offered in manual, that'd be cool for those select few who would want it that way, but I'm totally happy with it being this way. So thought I would kind of summarize the transmission talk in that sense. Now let's go with some other stuff that I just kind of noticed while having the car, some things that I thought was weird initially, maybe became normal. One of them being the rotary dial, going from park to drive, doing the little rotary spin. Thought that would be interesting. I got used to that literally in a day. I just went, yep, time to drive, put it all the way to the right. So totally fine. If I had any wish about that, 99% of the miles I put on this thing were in manual mode where I was clicking the paddles. And when I click the M, a little orange light illuminates to let me know it's in manual. And more often than not, I can't even see that light. If the sun's out, I have to cup my hand around it just to make sure it's on. Something that I quite like is that for the most part, when you turn the car off, it will remember most of the modes or the configuration that you had programmed it to when you turn the car back on. And if you don't want it to start in the quiet mode, it won't. And so that's pretty fun. Now, it won't start in the track mode. Of course, if I had it my way, it would just stay in the last mode I left it on. Even if that's track mode, on the track suspension, on the track exhaust, if I shut the car off that way, I want it right back to that mode. For some reason, they won't do that, and that's just okay. All it takes is a couple buttons pressed, and life is good. Something that might be important to some people, if not, it might just be an interesting thing, but the attention this car gets. It's a healthy amount, I will say. I don't think it's crazy supercar levels of attention. I think it's those who actually like the car quite a bit will usually be the ones to give you a thumbs up. Cool thing with it too is I hear all kinds of things about this car. Same could be true for a 350, same could be true for the new GTD. Anywhere from a $60,000 to a $350,000+ Mustang. A lot of people say that's expensive for a Mustang. They all look like the same car and all this kind of stuff. But those who are really into it don't care. We don't care if it shares the same moniker from a Hertz rental car with the EcoBoost engine. It doesn't matter. We buy the cars for ourselves, and if other people seem to like what we're doing, then thumbs up back to them as well. But most of those comments seem to stay online. Once you take this car in the real world, people seem to like it. Car people certainly like it. I don't get out there to car community events as much as I used to, unfortunately. I should probably change that. But when I get out there surrounded around car people, whether they're JDM people, whether they like German cars or just any other European cars out there, this just seems to get the tip of the hat. People just don't mind the Shelby GT350 or the GT500. It seems like people respect it. The other day I was driving and an Aston Martin Vantage, one of the new ones, flashed his lights, gave me a thumbs up. So it just seems like one of those cars that just get the thumbs up. I know a lot of Nissan GTRs as well give it the thumbs up. It's just kind of a cool, respected car. As far as the attention it gets, it's healthy. No one's ever going too crazy. It's just so easy to drive, spirited. It's also easy to drive, boring. I hardly do that, but if you wanted to put it in the normal mode and have it shift itself, anybody can drive this car. Do you trust them to not roll up on some curbs? that's on you. But anyone can drive this car, honestly. Surprise, surprise, it's got so much freaking horsepower. You may not realize how much horsepower it has because, like I've mentioned, the traction management system is so dang good. If you floor it and it doesn't think it can hook up enough, it throttles it down, but to the point to where most people may not even notice. If you know one of these cars after years of driving it, you'll know what is and isn't, full power. But the car does such a good job at not being intrusive when it does, intervene on you losing traction. In my 2 years, only 4 times, I think, I've actually turned traction control fully off. That's what truly 760 horsepower feels like, and it's a lot. It's a lot. We'll just leave it at that. It's a lot. I like this car and I don't want it written off, so I usually turn it back on, and that track mode is a nice balance for me. Let's get immature. The thing sounds so good. I don't want to compare it to the 350 and the old 500. Let's just enjoy this one now. This car sounds so good. It sounds amazing on the startup. It sounds amazing at idle. And it seems like it was tuned when the track exhaust is enabled. It seems like it was tuned to almost give you a little pop on some upshifts. Not all of them. If you could do it on every upshift, that'd be awesome. But sometimes when you hang on to the revs a little bit, then upshift, it's like this little gunshot, and it is so freaking addicting. Talking about some of the things that you'll pick up on when you own one, and I can't do this now because of copyright reasons, but the sound system inside is pretty good. This has got the technology package and just a really great sound system. Not much else I could say on that. It just sounds really, really good. And then some of the more daily drivable parts about it is that it's never scraped on anything, thankfully. The car actually isn't all that low. I think I've scraped more or come closer to scraping on the GT350. Guys, I think that's about it from the list I wrote. We're gonna end with this just by kind of talking about the summarizing thoughts. 2 years with this car, here's what I take away with it. The car is fast, but thankfully the big thing that I think this car will be remembered by from either just enthusiasts or if you were to drive one of these, what you will remember by the end of the day isn't just that it's fast, but the driving experience you got from it, the way it made you feel, how much fun you had while driving it. I've said this a ton of times years ago, and I'm gonna continue saying it only more as cars change for, unfortunately, the worse, in my opinion. But fast cars are great. I'm not gonna be against fast cars. But when these fast cars are being drawn up from the whiteboard to going to being a real road car, when their sole purpose is just to be fast and faster than the competition, and then fast is a moving goalpost that's always changing. What is fast now won't be fast in 5 years from now. And if we're always just chasing fast, it is gonna take away from the most important thing is these are already, in most people's cases, not their daily drivers. This is a second, third, fourth, 10th car. They're made for fun. They're made for recreation. Sitting on what is a very fast car might have the bragging right for a year or two that it might claim to be the fastest 0 to 60 or the fastest Nürburgring time. That's all great, but I think that should be the byproduct of what was hopefully sought after making a fun car. So this car being fast is great, but I could tell it wasn't made to be the fastest at anything. It wasn't made to shatter any records, but it was made to give you a certain driving impression. And I picked up on that the second I drove it. For the first time to now, the driving impression I get from it is a hero, man. It just makes you feel like a hero in a pretty controlled way relative to, 760 horsepower. It feels so much more controlled than I would have ever expected. The sound's amazing. The way you just are, connected to it, even through paddle shifters. There's no disconnect because of paddle shifters. You feel so one with this car. You feel like you are in it rather than riding on top of it and it has a mind of its own. That's kind of like the old GT500, and that's kind of merit in its own world as well. Not a bad thing. But this is a very cohesive car. It feels way more mature and refined than you would ever think a Mustang could ever feel like. And for all that, it's really cool, and it does it in a very unapologetic 5.2 liter supercharged V8 kind of way. And it's pretty freaking sweet. So I think that's the best way I could summarize this car. Even if it is not considered fast in 5 years' time, there's always gonna be a reason I wanna get the keys to this one and just rip it down to back road. It's a lot of fun. And so that being said, that's 2 years with the GT500. I'm not close to being bored of it. I don't even think a GTD will make me wanna sell this thing. We'll see when the GTD comes here. Maybe that'll change, but as of right now, it's exceeded all my expectations and, well, I've really liked it. So that does it. Thanks so much for watching. See you guys next time.